The following is brought to you by Element 14, the electronic design community where you can connect and collaborate with top engineers from around the world. Join now at element14.com. Welcome back to Sudo Sergeant. In this segment, I'm going to reply to some of your posts in the community forum. Now let's have a look. So Tony Roof asks in segment 00, what is Linux? Felix, what's a good Linux to start with, and can I use one of my Raspberry Pis to learn it? Okay, Tony Roof, you're going to use your Raspberry Pis, just start with a Raspbian. There's a huge community, it's easy to mess with. There's a lot of documentation. Definitely go visit the IRC channels and ask questions there to get some real-time feedback and learn some stuff that way. If you want to go with a distribution on, like, say, a desktop or a laptop, get yourself an old laptop or old desktop, whatever you have. A lot of people will look at me cross-eyed when I say, hey, start with Arch Linux. But if you're somebody who really wants to get in and learn something, Arch Linux is a great distribution to learn with, because just installing it takes a bit of effort to get it up and running. Whereas a lot of other distributions, you can just get an installer, and the installation process is pretty much automated compared to Arch Linux. But if you don't want to go that route and go way into the weeds, which I do recommend because the documentation is really thorough, I'd say maybe go to Fedora or Debian. So that would be my recommendation. Your mileage may vary. So in segment 04, an alternative to the Arduino IDE, Idenregib replies, hi, I'm using Linux in my day job, so it's only trivial wanting the same at home. I'm using Arduino MK, which allows to develop for Arduino using the Makefile approach. Iden provides a link and some instructions on how to install with apt-get, then carries on to say, this way you can have any ID you want. You know what, Iden? I think this is a really great utility. I followed that link, I checked it out. It's a really cool development tool. I really like it, and I think maybe in a future segment, I'll try doing some examples, exploring this a little bit more, and showing some use case examples of it. In segment 6, file permissions, I made a pretty significant mistake, and a lot of you called me out on it, and rightly so. Here's a response from Jack White. There is neither equals plus nor equals minus operator. On my system, equals plus does not add permissions, it replaces them as equals operator would. Equals minus clears all permissions despite anything after equals minus. For example, equals minus W is equivalent to minus RWX. This post was pretty big. He provided some examples, but he finishes his reply with, Felix, really? You had just one job. Explain the only parameter of a single command. I hereby demote you to sudo private. Well, Jack White, I'm gonna go ahead and try to regain my rank of sergeant, and maybe instead of demoting me, you could just give me a page 11 entry or something. So I got a screen capture going on over here. I have a terminal on one side, and I have Jack White's example on what I did wrong and how to properly do it right here. So I'm going to follow his steps in this example, and we'll see the right way to do this. So Jack White starts out by providing us some information from man chmod. The operator plus causes the selected file mode bits to be added to the existing file mode bits of each file. Minus causes them to be removed, and equal causes them to be added and causes unmentioned bits to be removed, except that the directories unmentioned, set user bit, group ID bits are not affected. So here's the example. I'm in a directory example. There's nothing in this directory. Nothing at all. I will now perform chmod on a file that isn't even there. Now watch this. We'll start by touch test. That's going to create our file that we're going to work with here. So ls space -l and then the name of the file. So we're just looking at that one file here. Now let's look at the permissions of this file before we do our initial chmod. So it was created with user read write, no execute, group read write, no execute, others read and no execute or no write. Now we'll do chmod 605 and then the name of the file. Let's ls-l that file. User permissions have remained the same. Group permissions have turned to nada, nilch, zich. The group cannot read the file, cannot write to the file, cannot execute the file. Others can read and execute. So this 6 right here in the 605 means read, write, no execute. 0 in the 605 means no read, write, execute for the group. 5 means read, no write, and execute for the others. The next thing we're going to do after 605, we look at the file, okay, and then Now we'll chmod, take this, paste it there. So let's analyze this before we actually do it. So user equals rx. So w is not included in here. So what should happen is the user should be able to read and execute, but not write. Everything else should stay the same. Let's see if my hypothesis remains true. Okay, do that. Now we'll look at the file again. Okay, let's test this. The owner can read, not write, but can execute. Group has remained the same, and others have remained the same. All right, that does what we anticipated. Next thing here on Jack White's example, we're going to go back to our previously known state, chmod 605. So we already know that 605 is read, write for owner, nothing for group, and read and execute for others. Let's double check just to make sure. Okay, that's exactly what we expected. So now it's chmod user plus rx test. Okay. What this should do is grant the user read and execute permissions. Let's look at the file to see if that is true. So that gives us read and write and execute for the owner, and then everything else remains the same. Okay, so where do we go next on our example here? Oh, we're going back to the known state here. So chmod 605 test, we already know what that does. We've done that twice now, and we've looked at it each time. This is the result of chmod 605. So now we'll do chmod u minus rx test. At this point, the user should only be able to write. Okay, let's do that, and then we will ls the file. Yep, indeed, that is the result. The user can only write, everything else remain the same. So the results of chmod minus u rx, the owner cannot read or execute the file, but the owner can write the file, which is kind of strange. You can write it, but you can't read it. I think that's an existential question, maybe. I don't know. So let's move on. Okay, then we put the file back to a known state. So next we'll do chmod u equals plus rx. So u equals plus rx. Right now the owner can read and write, but not execute. The group can't do anything. Others can read, but not execute. So now if we do u equals plus rx, the owner should be able to read, not write, but also execute, and everything else should stay the same. Let's find out. Okay, so we issue the instruction. Now we'll look at the file. Yep, that is the result. The owner can read, not execute, but can write. Then everything else remains the same. Okay, next we're going to go back to our previously known state. Next we'll do minus rx. Chmod u equals minus rx test, and look at the results. Before we look at the results, let's figure out what will happen. So equals, so anything after the equals, if it's not included, it's not going to be there, and we're on the users. Even though w isn't included here, since there's an equal sign for the operator, equal minus rx, since w is not included, and we're doing minus r and minus x, the user will have no privileges. The group will continue to have no privileges because group wasn't even affected, and others, it stays the same. They can read and execute. And that is the end of Jack White's example here. So we went through all the different scenarios of using equals, minus, equals plus, and just minus with different combinations of RWX. I apologize to the audience for providing you with inaccurate information, and thank you, Jack White, for correcting me. And I hope I can get my rank back. And that's all I have for this segment. I really appreciate being able to talk with the community. If you have any more comments, questions, corrections, or suggestions, please visit element14.com/pseudosergeant, and I'll see you on the command line.